Dude, I'm pumped to I was pumped to catch up because I was actually, Jocker. Do you know my mate Jocker?
Yeah.
I reckon he's Andy's
James O'Connor, yeah?
James O'Connor, of course.
Yeah.
So he messaged me the other day. He's like, bro, do you know the kind of times that Simon Hearn's putting up now? And I was like, no, I haven't actually, I haven't been following the triathlon scene too closely. What's going on? Mate, he dropped some of the times that that you'd been doing. I thought, okay. And then I caught up with Brent Ford, mutual friend of ours, the other day. And I saw that you were on his podcast. I was like, mate, as if I'm not going to message the great man Simon Hearn. Because, dude, I reckon the last time I saw you would have been at a Bucks party that you and I went to in about 2017, Andy O'Connor.
Yeah.
Back a while.
Yeah, because I remember speaking to you and Jock in the pub that day. And meanwhile, Andy was in his little cage in the middle of St Kilda getting fed beers through a funnel.
That was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. It's actually, so Jock's getting married. It's been postponed a couple of times with bloody COVID stuff, but I think it's at the end of next year. So he said to me, he's like, mate, like you can organise the Bucks, but if I see anything take place that's even close to what happened at Andrew O'Connor's Bucks party, he goes, mate, just consider the friendship done and the invite to the wedding will be retracted.
Yeah, I think that scarred a few people, to be honest.
I've still got some scabs.
Yeah, because that was like the first Bucks party I'd been to, and I was like, this is full on. Well, yeah, I got married 3 weeks ago, and we were meant to get married this weekend, just gone. But basically, more than half of our guests were going to be coming from Victoria, so we had to can it. And we just did like an elopement thing. But I had Mark, who was Andy's best man, as my best man. And I was like, no Bucks party. Like, we'll just go for a run and go get brunch and like just hang out. Like, I don't want a Bucks. Mm-hmm. And he's like, yeah. And then when we decided that, we're just going to do the elopement because it was too hard, Mark goes something like, oh, damn, shame about the Bucks party. I said, I wasn't having a Bucks party. He goes, oh, yeah.
As soon as you mentioned it was Mark Bormanis, I thought, mate, there is zero chance that bloke wouldn't have organised you a nice little Bucks party, no matter how highly requested it was that there was no Bucks. He would make sure. I'm surprised he didn't organise something via Zoom, actually, knowing him.
Well, I think because he's got Ray, his little kid now, so I think between that and work and stuff, he's too busy with it all, which is good for me. But we're still going to try and have like a party next year when we can. So I think I still probably won't get away with it. We'll wait and see. I think he's actually moving overseas.
Oh, where's he off to?
Denmark, I believe. I think his partner Bridie got a big corporate gig with the company over there, so they're going to move to Denmark next year, pretty soon, I think.
Smart man. Yeah. I'm pretty keen to move to Denmark right now. Melbourne's not that appealing.
You guys have had it so rough.
You're in Queensland, aren't you?
Yeah, we moved to basically Mooloolaba about 4 and a bit years ago. Yeah. We did a year of work after we finished uni down in Melbourne, and then I'd kind of suggested to Hannah, I was like, how do you feel about, moving somewhere where the weather's a bit nicer and it's nice for training and it's got like, just the environment for it. And she was like, yeah, we'll give it a go. And then we got some jobs up here and we moved. So yeah, we love it. We love it here. Yeah.
That's awesome. So it's funny because my memory of sitting in that pub that you mentioned before at Andy's Bucks was, I think that was just before you moved, because I remember talking to you and you were having a chat about some plans that you had to get up to Queensland. I'm pretty sure, unless I've just made up that memory. But what was that? That would have been 2017, I think that Bucks was.
No, you're right. Yeah, it must have been. We must have moved not long after that. Yeah.
How old are you now?
I'm 27. I'll be 28 this month.
Yeah.
So yeah, it must have been just after. We must have had the plans pretty much laid out. I can't remember when the Bucks party was. Anyway, we moved and we were like, well, look, if we don't like it, both of us being physios, like we can get jobs pretty well anywhere. If we don't like it, we'll just move back. Like, what's the worst that can happen? And then we got up here and we're like, this is kind of our kind of jam. You know, just like everyone's up early exercising, and the beach is 10 minutes away, and they're all beautiful beaches. And so we just really like it. Yeah.
Man,
yeah.
what a great setup. So just to lay the cards on the table, this is going to be as educational for me as what it's going to be for, our audience who's listening that don't know about you just yet. Because triathlon scene is one that I'm fascinated in by default, because I got involved in triathlon when I was about 13. That was sort of my entrance. That was where I found out I could run. Because the swimming league was scraping through, the bike league was okay, and then I managed to take a few scalps on the run. But I think eventually I was living over in WA when I got involved in the triathlon scene, and there was one too many shark stories and I thought, you know what, I might just stick with the duathlons in the future. There's not there's not so many sharks. So I've got an appreciation for it, and I've had the great man Macca. He came on a few months ago to have a chat. Mate, I've bloody completely blanked on her name. Like the best female triathlete of all time from Australia. What I can't
from
believe
Australia. Miranda Carfrae or Emma Carney?
Emma Carney is what it was. I hope she doesn't listen to this podcast, because I was so excited to get her on. I'll just have to edit that part out. But it's really interesting talking to these guys, because Macca was, I don't know how well you know these guys, but he was telling me his introduction was sort of the reverse. Like, I think he was a pretty good cross-country runner as a junior, and then made his way into the triathlon scene. And I don't know, Emma, she said that she came from a distance running background as well. And I'm always fascinated to know the journey a little bit about how people find their way into the triathlon scene, because I remember when we last caught up, you were chatting about, heading up to Queensland to do your training. I didn't know what level you were competing at. I didn't know how well you were going. I didn't know what your goals heading up there were. But just as a bit of a blanket overview as to how your career's progressed, do you just want to give us a little bit of a walkthrough of those last 4 years? Because I guess as a bloke who's been standing on the outside, your progress has just been mind-blowing. It's like I was doing little fist pumps when I was looking through some of your finish times the other day. But I don't know how much of a surprise those times have been to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, a lot of hard work's gone into it over multiple years. So I guess it's not a surprise to me, some of the race results, like not a big surprise, because you'd know from your running stuff. It's like, well, if you haven't shown it in training, you can't expect to then just like go and be amazing on race day and do stuff that you've never been capable of in training, or at least expressed in training, But I guess like my introduction to triathlon was like I ran cross country at school, but like I didn't even make a cross country team until like year 11, year 12. But I loved training, and I'd go to swim training and stuff, and I'd never make a swim team. I had really no intention, to be honest, of making teams, but I loved training and I loved the process. And then I think through late high school, I got more involved in running, and it was like just a way for me to keep myself sane while I was trying to study. And it helped. I don't know, I'd get up and run in the morning, like, 5 to 7 Ks every morning, like, I don't know, 45 minutes or something like that. And it was just a way that I would stay fit I was playing AFL at the time, basketball, all sorts of different sports. And I just enjoyed the process of training. And so I mostly grew up playing team sports. And then I did a triathlon. I think it was probably watching Macca, to be honest. I watched the Hawaiian Ironman with Dad on TV, as many kids would have growing up on, like, I think it was on Channel 9. And you'd see these battles, and these guys like had just done these epic swims and bike rides, and now they're running a marathon shoulder to shoulder. And I'm pretty sure it's probably one of Macca's races that I was watching with Dad, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And so I did a triathlon. I got a road bike, an old road bike, and I did a triathlon at the end of year 10 at school, and just like one of the Gatorade series ones in Melbourne. And I've got some photos of that. It's pretty funny. I look absolutely miserable because it was cold, it was raining, and I had my mate's surfing wetsuit. So it wasn't like a swimming wetsuit, it was a surfing wetsuit. I didn't even have clip-in bike shoes. I just wore my runners on the bike. So I wasn't like, I didn't know anything about cycling or the sport, to be honest, and didn't have any of the right gear. And then, but I enjoyed it and I finished, and I was like, I think I said to my dad, I was like, I feel like I could do that again. Like, I didn't really push myself to the limit, but I was like, I really had fun. It was great once I warmed up after the swim and stuff. And anyway, then I studied hard to get into physio, because I knew that's what I wanted to do. And then I got back into it in first year uni when I had a bit more time, and I did a duathlon. And I was like, and by that time I'd done a fair bit more running. Like, I was cross country captain at school, and I wasn't amazing or anything, but I'd been consistent with my run training. And so I'd been seeing improvements. And yeah, so I was like, oh, I'll go and do these duathlons in winter. And I signed up with one of the tri clubs, did one of the introduction courses. So I learned more about like transitions and that kind of thing. And then, yeah, I really got into it. And I realized, like, if I'm going to compete with these guys, I probably need one of those time trial bikes, because all those races were non-drafting on the bike. And did that, and then just kind of developed and really enjoyed the training. Like, I trained with our friends that we were talking about earlier, like Mark and Andy. And was gradually, I started, somewhere in the middle of my age group, finishing races. And then I was like, oh, okay, if I want to beat those guys, like, I'm outrunning them by a minute, and I'm okay on the bike. I'm like just about there on the bike with them, but my swim's a minute or two behind. So then I was like, it was the process of seeing my swim times improve. And then I distinctly remember at the time I was in like the 16 to 19 age group. And at the start of the season probably goes, those Gatorade series probably go for 4 months over summer or something like that. And by the end of that summer, I was almost coming out of the water with those same guys. And then I'd be finishing, 20 or 30 seconds ahead of them, because I could run them down on the run. And I was like, how cool is this? Like, the more effort I put in, the better results I'm getting. And I was like, this is cool. And I'm actually enjoying this, and I'm seeing improvements. So anyway, then started working, and by that time I'd kind of moved more into the half Ironman distance a little bit more. And I guess I'd seen the next progression for me. I was racing open by that stage in like all these local races, and I was doing fairly well in the open category against guys who were a bit older than me. And so I guess I thought I had some potential if I could keep training and improving. And then I started working, and Hannah and I discussed moving up to the Sunshine Coast. And I said to Hannah, if we move and the finances are possible, can I work part-time? And she was like, yeah, let's do it. If it works out financially that we can afford to, then yeah, let's do it. So I did that, and I was seeing more improvements because I could dedicate more time and energy to the training. And I'd had a whole host of kind of local coaches down in Melbourne, which was great. And I enjoyed learning and being involved with the tri clubs down there. But when we moved up here, I ended up just kind of coaching myself. And I was at this stage where I'd been doing well in the 70.3s as an age group athlete, and was kind of generally in the top, say, 5 finishes for the age group athletes, whatever category that is. I would have been probably 20 to 24 at the time, but I would have been overall top 5 for the age groupers, but still, 10 or 15 minutes behind the professional athletes. And so I was like, well, I could probably qualify for my professional license, but I don't want to make that step until I feel I'm ready, because it's quite a different race in the professional field. And I knew that, and people had told me that, and I knew that, because the swim's so much more important and the bike is a lot more tactical rather than like a solo time trial type thing in an age group race. And then even the run, you can have surges and things as well if there's a group of guys together. So anyway, I was Hannah and I were actually on an overseas holiday, and I had Cairns 70.3 coming up, and this must have been in 2018, and we were in Barcelona and I was training, and I was saying to Hannah, like, I know I'm getting better, and I really want to make this next step to the professional ranks, but I think I really need someone who knows what it takes at that level, who can be honest with me. And so I was looking around at the time. There's, various coaches, particularly kind of in the US and Europe and stuff. And I was researching, and I found this coach who I now work with and have worked with for like 3.5 years. His name's David Tilbury Davis. And at the time, he was advising guys like Lionel Sanders, Cody Beals, who, they were doing really, really well at that time. So I just shot him an email and I said, this is who I am, and these are my results. This is where I want to kind of head. But I want someone to work with me who's not going to blow steam up my bum and tell me I'm amazing, but it's honest with me and says, no, your swim's not good enough, but this is what we need to do to get it to that next step so that you're ready to progress into the professional field. So, anyway, I ended up working with David from that point. That was, I think by the time we started together, it was about 3 weeks out from Cairns 70.3. And so I did that race and was first age grouper overall. There wasn't a professional race that day. There was just the Ironman is run on the same day, the full distance Ironman, and that has a professional race. So I was the first age grouper, and I think I set a course record by about a minute. And I was like, okay, like I'm heading in the right direction. But at the same time, I watched that day, and some of your viewers might know these names, some might not, but Javier Gomez, who's like multiple-time world champion Olympic. He's been to multiple Olympics. I don't know if he's got gold at the Olympics, but I know he got bronze a few years ago. Anyway, him and Braden Curry basically did the same time I did for the half Ironman, for the full Ironman, but even slightly faster maybe. I was like, oh my God, how do these guys do that? Like, there's no way I'm ready. Like, what the hell? So anyway, David and I discussed a bit of a plan, and I decided to do, that would have been June 2018. And the Sunshine Coast 70.3 was on in August or September. So I went and did that, and I was first age group athlete there as well. And that day they did have a professional race at the same time. And I think I was, I don't know, I must have been top 15 or 20 overall. And some of my times were in the mix with some of the professional guys who are at the back end of the professional field. And so after that point, it was like, okay, I think the next step is to go into the professional field and give it a go. And luckily in Queensland, there's a few more local races that you can do as an age group athlete without needing a professional license in the open category. So at the time there was Yeppoon long distance, Harvey Bay 100, and Hell of the West. So I went and did those, and I think I even did Husky. And so I got to race guys like I raced Craig Alexander at Husky that year, and a few of the up and coming guys like Max Newman and some other guys in that open category. And I don't know what the times were, but they would have beaten me by 10 or 15 minutes. But at the same time, I felt like, okay, I was like in the race a little bit, and I know that I'm still improving. And then I did my first Ironman 70.3 in the professional field at Sunshine Coast the following year. So there was a year after I'd been the first age group athlete. And yeah, I had a really good race that day. I think the race tactics just worked out in my favor. And I managed to sit on the back end of the front swim group, stay in the bike group, and then have a pretty good run. And I got third. And Braden Curry won that day, and Steve McKenna got second. And so I was still a bit off Braden's time, and I think I was a minute or so, maybe 2 minutes behind Steve or something. But at the same time, I was like, okay, it's been a year since I was in the age group field, and now I got third here. Like, okay, I'm heading in the right direction. And so that just affirmed that, yeah, we're doing the right things, and this is probably something that I can continue to pursue, and I'm not really wasting my time. So yeah, but I mean, it's been, yeah, a lot of training, a lot of ups and downs. Like, it's it's hard. I think there's a lot more pressure and anxiety that can come with racing in the professional field if you're trying to pursue making a living, in it. Because for me, I've got my physio degree, so sometimes I'm like, it would be so much easier to just go and work full time and get a paycheck, especially when you have a disappointing race. But I think I would have so many regrets if I did that too. So I'm full time.
You're full time. You're full time in the triathlon scene now.
Yeah. So I did Cairns Ironman in June this year, and I got fourth in the professional field. I was a minute behind Josh Amberger, who is a guy that's been doing the sport for many years full time and has great sponsors and everything. Max Newman won and Tim Burkle got second. So I still beat a few guys that, before the race, I was like, well, I don't know how I'm going to go here. But I'm in the mix. So I managed to get a few sponsors after that. Our friend Andy O'Connor and our other friend Brenton Ford, who both own their own businesses. And I think we had a discussion after that race, and they were like, well, what do you need? What do you need? We want to support you. So with their support, I've been able to Hannah and I just discussed, I'll just go full time for the next little while and pursue it full head on and see how we go. So that is that's awesome. Where I'm at the moment.
That is awesome, man. There's a few things I've sort of got an asterisk next to that I want to that you just mentioned that I want to pick your brains about. The first one, just while it's sort of a little bit more topical, is I'm always interested when any athlete is progressing through the ranks and all of a sudden the people they used to admire start to become, not just someone they admire, but someone they're thinking, hang on a second, if I have a good day here, I could rub shoulders with this bloke and perhaps even finish a little bit ahead of them. And you're speaking about the stress of or the anxiety that comes with having to perform to get your paycheck. And I guess just looking at both of those aspects, looking at the the competitive side of these athletes that you once would have looked up to and maybe been in awe of, and also having to perform to a degree where now it's like, all right, I got to try and beat these guys. How have you navigated that headspace? Like, does it become less intimidating lining up against these guys? I guess, especially now you're beating them, some of them, more and more, or is it still something where you catch yourself on the start line going, like, hang on a second, this is ridiculous, the level that I'm competing at right here?
I think it's a gradual, for me, it's been like a gradual process of just realizing that I've done the hard work and I deserve to be there. And, these guys are all human. Everyone has a good day. Everyone can have a bad day. And I think just trusting in the training that you've done and knowing that you are good enough, which is sometimes is really hard, And I wasn't a particularly talented youngster or anything like that. I wasn't anyone who was like told they're going to be great. And so I didn't have that big belief behind myself sometimes. I think it's just been a gradual process of believing in myself and trusting in the process that I've gone through to get to that race, and also detaching a little bit from the outcome of a single race and realizing it's a process. And if you like, all you can do on that day is your best, right? So if you finish and it's 10th, but you've absolutely given it your all, or it's first and you've given it your all, what more is there? There's nothing more. So I think sometimes I have to come back to that. And then also looking at it and framing it of trying to look at certain situations that I might have anxiety around, about tactics and things that might play out, rather than being anxious about them, looking at them as like a challenge and being inquisitive about them. So like, if I'm worried about the swim, it's like, instead of being like, oh, what happens if so-and-so takes it out really hard and I can't get onto the group or whatever, and reframing it and thinking like, but what if I could do that? How good would that be? Then I'll be in the race. And at the end of the day, like I said, if you do your best, that's all there is. And then you've got an opportunity to reflect on the race, what went well, what didn't go so well, and come back to it and go, okay, well, this is what I need to work on for the next one. But yeah, I think, there's always going to be that sense of like, oh God, these guys are the guys that I was watching, 2 years ago that I was admiring, going, gosh, they're so fast. And then all of a sudden you're running next to them. But I don't have that sensation in the race really anymore. I think I'm learning, there's kind of the racing Simon and there's the Simon outside of racing, and they're kind of two different characters. And when I'm racing, like, you have to be pretty ruthless about your decisions and how you're going to race. That doesn't mean you're unfair or you're cheating or anything like that, but you have to be, you have to be ruthless, and you're in it for you within the race. Outside of the race, I try and be friendly with all the guys, and there's no hard feelings or anything. But when we're racing, and they're all the same way. They're all the same way. And I think it took me a while to get my head around that, because I don't come from an extremely competitive background, whereas I think some people it probably is a little bit more natural. So yeah, I've had to kind of develop that a little bit, I think.
Yeah, man, that's I love the way you speak of the psychology, and I love that that little differential between the bloke you are when you're not on the start line or mid race, and the bloke you are outside of it. And you were mentioning before that there's a simple strategy that you use throughout or when you're dealing with the nerves of a swim, or the anticipation of what may or may not happen. And just the simple idea of a reframe is something that you touched on. And whenever someone mentions reframing, I assume they've got like a little bit of an insight into the world of psychology, which in the sporting scene is obviously a powerful edge if you can master it. And I was just curious to know, like, outside of, and we'll get into the training and stuff in a minute, because I'm fascinated to know what a week in your life of training looks like at the moment. But when it comes to psychology, is that something that you've really invested in? Like, has it been an effort to develop the confidence, or has it sort of just, the confidence has just followed the improvements?
Yeah, no, I'll be honest, I had a patch where I was really low, and I had a lot of anxiety around races that were coming up, and it really affected my training and my motivation to train. And it actually came off the back of a really good race result. And then good old social media kicked in, and so that really affected me. So I spoke to I have had some sessions with a sports psychologist, and so she has been awesome in helping me realize that being able to reframe the way I'm thinking about certain situations, like we talked about in the swim or whatever. And then also realizing that sometimes other people's opinions don't matter that much. And like, I know what happened during the race, and I know the way that I am. And I would never take advantage in some sort of way that I thought was cheating or whatever. And so sometimes things are said, and you just have to let them go. But it was hard. And so I've had a few sessions with the sports psych, and it's been really helpful for me, because like I said earlier, the anxiety around racing is a bit higher now. And it's just because there's more, I guess, on the line than when I was racing age group. It doesn't mean that I didn't care about my results and get nervous when I was racing an age group. It's just that there's a lot more to the professional racing in terms of tactics and different dynamics within a race as well. Yeah.
Craig Mottram used to always talk about the pressure there was to beat the Africans. I remember, did you ever see that documentary, The Big Mzungu or whatever it was called, that came out with Sports Illustrated? It was like back in 2006. I reckon he had just had his massive runs at the Melbourne Commonwealth Games, and they the Kenyans call him Big Mzungu. It means big white man. And he was talking in that documentary about how hard it is to beat these Kenyans or these Africans. And he said, well, the reason it's so hard is because if these guys don't win, they don't eat. And he goes, so when you've got that kind of pressure on the line, it's bloody hard. And just hearing you explain I guess the transition you've taken, or the luxury that it would feel like just to be able to lean back on your physio degree and just get that consistent weekly income. And it's not dictated based on, your race result or where you finish or how fast you finished your run or whatever. It's a really interesting kind of thing to navigate. And I can understand that if you're hadn't sort of done a little bit of work with the psychology, it could easily just run all over the top of you. But it sounds as though you've sort of established a really nice balance. And the reason I really want to put a pin in this is because one of the most common questions that people who listen to this podcast shoot me through on Instagram is, have you got any resources around just dealing with, frustration, whether it's with injury or lack of performance, or the plateaus that come, or just the expectation that you have on yourself that you haven't quite reached yet. And I think the beauty with your story as well is that you weren't just handed, I guess anyone who's performing at your level isn't handed anything on a little silver platter. But I think the fact that you didn't come from necessarily, like, you weren't winning national titles at 12 years old. You didn't feel like the world necessarily owed you anything. And with that, I wonder how much of, I always get the sense that a person in your position has much more of an appreciation for the hard work. You almost present what you're saying with a sense of humility, which is refreshing. But like, what are some of the strategies that you and your sports psych went through? Like, are there any real standout points? Obviously, you mentioned reframing.
I think during the race in particular as well was trying to remember all the things we discussed, but trying to come back to within yourself, because particularly say in the swim or the bike, where there's tactics, someone might surge, or really have to concentrate during that time, and you can get I can tend to get quite externally focused around what someone else is doing or may be doing or might not be doing, and then just trying to bring it back within myself. So focusing on, say we're on the bike, like focusing on my position, trying to stay relaxed, how's my cadence, all those sorts of things. So trying to bring it back within myself. And then, I think it's difficult. Like, I have certain cues in the swim that when I get a little bit anxious, or just things that'll bring me back to within myself, because especially with swimming, like, sometimes the more you thrash, the slower you go. So you still have to maintain technique and stay somewhat relaxed in the water in order to swim efficiently and fast. So I've got like a little thing, we call it the triple H, which is like hands, hips, and head. So focusing on where my hands are entering the water and what they're doing, where my head is in the water, my head position in the water, and then my hips as well, because obviously you want your head and hips high in the water. Then I've got another one on the bike and on the run that I kind of bring myself back to when I feel myself kind of beginning to become worried about the dynamics too much, rather than just worrying about what I'm doing, what I need to do to have my best result. In terms of like the other stuff you're saying, like, I've always had a very long-term outlook on the sport and my progression. So I guess I haven't had many injuries, and I mean, part of that's probably my physio knowledge and everything like that. But I think also I've always had a long-term view. So I've always thought that you're going to get the best results over a long-term progression over 6 months to a year and year on year, rather than trying to bury yourself into the ground for 2 months and then expect that you're just going to be world champion all of a sudden. And I've always had like a bit more of a long-term view of things, which I think's helped. But obviously there is times in training that you see plateaus and things, but I think sometimes also having things outside the sport that you just appreciate, and you realize that sport's sport and you've also got a life outside of that. So for me, like, just going to the beach with Hannah and the dog and stuff, and trying to just realize that how lucky we are and how lucky I am that I get to do this, for now trying to pursue it as a full-time job. It's like, such a privilege. Something that I'd, growing up, I never thought that I would try and be a professional athlete. Yeah. So just sometimes bring myself back to realize that I'm pretty lucky is also important, I think. Yeah,
that's cool, man. That's really cool. So what's on the radar for you at the moment? Because obviously, well, being just in Queensland, I know you haven't been too badly affected by the lockdowns. Yeah. I'm not sure what it's meant for races and things like that, but I guess with the races that you're eyeing off, they're not all happening in Queensland. So has it been an interesting period for you to navigate the sort of last 18 months in the racing scene?
Yeah, it's probably one of the worst times to try and make a living as an athlete when you've got no races.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been really lucky that our pools and stuff have been open. I don't know how the guys from, we had those periods where Victoria had no cases, and a few of the guys would go to New South Wales or Queensland to do a race, but they've probably had 3 or 4 months where they haven't been able to swim because the pools haven't been open. So we've certainly had it a lot luckier in that regard, and I've definitely been able to put away, months and months of good training, which has been great. But then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got very limited racing. So at the moment, in Queensland, we don't have any cases, which is great. So I've got Noosa Triathlon, which is an Olympic distance race in 2 weeks, and then 3 weeks after that, I've got the Hervey Bay 100, which is middle distance, like half Ironman type race. And then Ironman Bustleton's about 3 weeks after that in December, but I don't think I'll be able to get there. So if I can go, I'll go and do it, but otherwise, I don't think I'll be able to get there. My training buddy up here, Lockie, who's coached by David as well, I think he's planning on doing 2 weeks in Adelaide in kind of at his grandparents' place to try and then get to Bustleton without needing to do like a hotel quarantine type situation. But I think from Queensland at the moment, I think we're still like an amber or something like that for Western Australia. So I don't think we can get in unless we do quarantine. Yeah. So at the moment, really the plan is to do a few races then early next year in Australia, whatever I can. And then I'm thinking I'm going to head to Spain. If it all works out, we'll try and find somewhere where it's fairly low rent, maybe with another athlete or two, and then go and do some European races. Yeah.
Beautiful, man. I wonder, so are there different rules for you traveling to WA? Because I noticed I don't know if you saw Jess Stenson or Jess Trengo formerly. She just went and ran I think it was the Perth Marathon. She ran 2 hours 25, and she went over there from South Australia. So I wonder,
yes,
like I know it's confusing, but is there like a little travel bubble situation going on between South Australia and WA?
I'm not 100% sure. I think it's because South Australia hasn't had any cases in, say, like the last month. So now they're green and they can kind of go to and from WA. I think that would change pretty quickly if South Australia all of a sudden had cases. WA would probably say, anyone coming from there has to quarantine. So that's why my friend's Lockie's going to go to South Australia, stay with his grandparents for 2 weeks. So he's effectively like quarantined.
Smart, man.
And then try and get to the race. Yeah. So it's been a tricky time. But at the same time, like the way I'm looking at it at the moment is when I get to Europe, I just want to be really ready to go and race and try and mix it with some of the guys over there. Because it's been awesome being able to race against some really high quality athletes in Australia. But I think in order to attract sponsors, like triathlon's not huge in Australia, and there's not a huge amount of sponsorship. And the kind of the reality is, if you want to get sponsored, you need to be doing well at races. And so if you don't have many races to do, like it's just been a bit tough in that regard. So I would probably try and head to Europe next year and try and do well at a few races and meet a few people over there.
Yeah, awesome, man. So the triathlon scene over in Spain is it's a bit more intense, a bit more impressive in terms of just being able to attract that revenue through sponsors. And it's, man, I don't know how much you've listened to the podcast, but I talk a little bit about how when I finished running, I was like, all right, what do I do with all this energy? And dude, I started doing stand-up comedy about 2.5 years ago, and became like so obsessed with it, man. Like I just love it. Like it's really weird how much my passion and commitment to the running scene translated so beautifully. And talk about, mate, like if there's one place you don't want to have a bad performance, it's a room full of 100 people, and I've had plenty of them as well. So
talk about the anxiety
and talk about the reframing. No, it's fine, Tyson. You're not a complete wanker. Don't worry about it. But mate, it's been really interesting. But I can sort of sympathize with a lot of athletes. Obviously, I'm not attracting any sponsors or attracting any revenue through the comedy scene. But just in terms of being able to get out there and practice your craft, it's been a frustrating time. So hopefully these next couple of months, man, we can both. Well, I'm not going to put myself on your level. I'm just going to say, hopefully for your sake, in the next couple of months, we can get you back over to Spain and start pumping some big races. But I wanted to ask you, did you say your head coach's name is Dave?
David, yeah.
David, yeah. I wanted to ask about David. So this is one thing I'm fascinated by. So obviously, in the running scene, you've got your one coach, and you go, all right, you're my coach. What are we doing? But in the triathlon scene, when you've got you've got the bike, the swim, the bike, the run, does David serve as your head coach? And then are you going to is Brent Ford helping you with your swimming technique and things like that? Or like, how do you navigate who focuses on what and how they all blend together?
Good question. Yeah. So David, when we first started together, was based in Seattle in the US, and he's now in Finland. So we do all our correspondence through, WhatsApp and Training Peaks. Some of your listeners would probably be familiar with Training Peaks. Yeah. And so David oversees the broad outlay of all the training as well, and the long-term view based on what races we've got in, say, that year. And then he also will structure the weeks as well. But I do a swim squad on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday here. So basically, depending on what the swim squad coach kind of prescribes will depend on then, how tired or how much energy I have the rest of the day. So I just kind of have to manage that based on the sessions that David's given me in the back half of the day to do. So on a Wednesday, I might have the swim squad for an hour and 45 minutes in the morning, and then I might have a 3-hour ride and a run to do in the afternoon. And then I'll just have to manage that depending on how tired I am from the swimming. But yeah, so basically David plans out all the biking and running. For the swim, I've got the swim squad, and I use Brent for the technical stuff, like you said. So I tend to send Brent like a GoPro video of my swimming underwater every, probably on average, 4 to 6 months, because these changes do take time. And takes a lot of constant thinking about changing technique. And then on the bike, David sets all the programming and for that and training for that. I've got a bike fitter up here in Coolum that I'll see if I have any bike fitting problems, because aerodynamics and fitting is very important on the bike. And then for the running, David sets all the programming for that. And I've done a little bit of run technique stuff with another friend that I've got in Melbourne. So I haven't done much with him recently, but in prior years I did, which was good.
Not Paul McKinnon.
Yeah. Paul
great
McKinnon.
Man.
Yep.
He's been on a couple he's a friend of mine. Yeah. He's I met him through here because I used to see him post his videos. I thought, this guy knows what he's talking about, I reckon. And he's a good looking rooster as well. So I thought, all right, I'm going to message him and go, mate, can I come over and we'll do a little coffee date and also record a podcast. And I don't think he was overly happy with me referring to it as a coffee date, but he was good enough to come on. And it's been really interesting. I've just seen he's launched his online membership recently, which I was getting stuck into him about earlier. I was like, mate, I reckon there'd be a real interest in this. And then I thought he had forgotten about it and just saw a post pop up on Instagram the other day. So no, that's good.
I spoke to Paul on the phone for about an hour yesterday, and we were talking about what he's been doing with his website. So he sent me through his demo website and everything. It looks good. I think he'll do well with it. And he as you probably know, have you done a session with him?
No, he's actually offered to do a session together. And I just, because I'm not competing at a super high level anymore, I'm a little bit like, you know what, I'm not that fast. But in terms of anyone who comes to me and says, mate, is there someone that you go to for technique work? I go, hey, I got this, mate.
That's what I do as well. He's good. And I'd done various things in the past with coaches telling me to do this and that, but the way that Paul explains things is, I find, quite different, and I really like it, and I've really gotten a lot from the stuff that he's given me. And so, yeah, with the training as well, I've recently just started to have a little bit more input into it with David. So I've started this is only like the last 2 weeks, just because previously when I was working part-time as well, I kind of just wanted to be a little bit of a robot and just like, you tell me what to do, I'll just go and do it because I'm at work half the day and then I'm training. So I just want you just tell me. But now that I'm full-time, I want to have a little bit more input into it and try and take a little bit more responsibility for it, because I think it helps me mentally to plan for the weeks and months ahead and think about what purpose am I trying to achieve within a session. So just taking a little bit, because I've always been interested in like exercise physiology and testing and things. And I purchased a lactate testing monitor a while back and don't use it that often. So I've started using it a bit more as well, just to keep record of things and take a little bit more interest in like how I'm responding to the training. And that's just for me and some people wouldn't like that. Some people would probably prefer to just, you tell me what to do and I'll just do it. But for my brain, I think it's good to take a bit of responsibility and question, why are we doing this? What are we trying to get out of it? So that's kind of a more recent thing that I've been doing with David as well.
Yeah. What does the running side of things look like for you? So like coming from a distance running background, obviously we know, all right, 7 days a week, you'll have a couple of lighter days in there, session on Tuesday, faster session Thursday, pretty standard Australian model. Like, are you running every day, or are there a couple of days where you're just focusing more on the bike or the swim? Like, what does the actual training structure look like?
Yeah, I'd probably run like 4 or 5 days a week, I'd say. Yeah. And it varies depending on what races are coming up. Like typically there'll be like a long run on a Sunday and a long ride on a Saturday. And sometimes like a run off the bike on a Saturday as well. And then typically there'll be, depending on what the focus is at the time, there'll probably be some sort of lighter session Tuesday and then a bit more of a heavy session Thursday as well, and then probably just one easy run on Wednesday or Friday or something like that, like a 30 to 40 minute jog type thing. Yeah, but it really does vary. And like if we're coming up to a race, some of the harder runs might be straight off the bike, so you're getting used to that feeling of running at pace on heavy legs. And like a really specific session, but that might only start 3 weeks out from a particular race.
Yeah. That was one thing that Emma Carney said to me, actually, and it tripped me out a little bit, because in my limited experience in the triathlon scene as a young fella, I just assumed that, all right, if you want to be good at running off a bike, then practice just running off a bike all the time. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, because Em was saying, she goes, no, if you want to practice running slow, then practice running off a bike. But if you want to get fast, like just go out and run fast. I thought that's a really interesting perspective. And I didn't know enough to know whether that was like a universal mindset in the triathlon scene that, go out and do the fast runs fast. What is it? It's like a little bit of a trade-off, a little bit of a balancing act between, all right, well, you've got to do the fast stuff, but you can't just let it be a complete shock to the system, getting off the bike with heavy legs and trying to navigate your way through.
Yeah. And obviously if you've done like a 2 or 3 or 4 hour ride and you go and try and run hard off that bike ride, you've probably got an increased risk of injury as well if you're tired and your technique's not as good and everything like that. So yeah, it's definitely a balance. Some of my best races though have come off, like I'll still do a hard session during the week when I'm a bit more fresh, like like your faster run, like say for me, if I'm trying to run 320, 325 off the bike for a half Ironman, so for 21K, like I might do some sort of faster track session on a Tuesday, but then on a Saturday I've got a specific bike session that's like 2.5 hours with hard intervals, and then I'll run at 315 to 320 per K off the bike for some intervals. But that will only be specifically leading into a race, so like 2 or 3 weeks out. But yeah, I think most modern programs these days, a lot of the hard running is not straight off the bike, and probably because of the increased risk of injury, because you're already in like a a glycogen depleted state, you're fatigued, and then you're trying to run fast and you're just adding more stress onto the system, whereas you're probably better off doing that bike ride, recovering somewhat, then coming back tomorrow and running fast when your system's a bit more ready and prepared for it. So yeah, there's different schools of thoughts around it, and different programs and coaches and athletes will do things differently. Yeah.
Interesting talking to you or hearing you talk about the glycogen depletion that you're experiencing when you get off the bike. Because one thing that I was never really super focused on when I was training as a distance runner myself was like I was cautious as to what I ate, but I wasn't necessarily thinking about what's the best food to eat at what time to make sure I'm well fueled, to make sure I'm well recovered. I was usually like, hey, that looks nice, I'll eat that. So, but obviously, like once I finished my competitive running, started training for a marathon, that started to change a bit, because I was like, all right, well, if I want to do this well, I'm going to have to pay a little bit more attention to the fuel that I'm bringing in. And it almost seems like a whole nother league in itself, in especially the Ironman world, where you're out there for, if you've had a great day, just over 8 hours, or hopefully soon just under 8 hours. It's a long time to be out on the road and try and keep yourself well energized. Like, has that been something? Well, dumb question, but I was going to say, like, how have you navigated that space of trying to figure out what works for you, like from gels to liquids to foods to whatever else is involved?
It's actually a good question, because particularly the longer distance you go, the more important it becomes during a race, right? Whereas if you're racing a sprint distance, which is like an hour, or an Olympic distance even, which is 2 hours, an hour 45 for the really fast guys, you can get away with not needing too much. Like, the guys will have something on the bike, but it's not nearly what you need for, say, a half Ironman or a full Ironman. But then you've also got your day-to-day nutrition as well, which, like, you probably, when you're doing your marathon, you're like thinking about, okay, well, I've just run my 36K long run pretty hard, and tomorrow I've got to go and run again, or this afternoon, or whatever. And you start thinking more as, because you were coming from you used to run 800.
Yeah,
is that right?
A little bit further, probably 1,500 to 3K, with the extent of my distances were probably around the 10K, which is partly the reason I didn't focus a whole heap on, that, like, even though it would have been of benefit. But as you're saying, even with the halves that you're speaking about, it's interesting to know that it's not as much as a priority, or the sprints.
In the sprint you don't really worry too much. So you've got like day-to-day nutrition, and for me, I find, like, especially now I'm training full time, like the volume's gone up a little bit, and I find if I have, like, even if I have 2 or 3 days where I feel like I haven't eaten enough, that's when I think I become more vulnerable to illness and that kind of thing, and become run down, and I just can't get up for the next session, and it becomes like this snowball effect. So at the moment, I'm just trying to eat like a lot of like good food, but quite a lot of food. And then nutrition during training has become a lot more of a focus for me as well, particularly. So I did my first Ironman in Cairns last year, and then did my second one in June this year at Cairns as well. And during training, so you're doing like 4 to 5 to 6 hour rides. It becomes really important to fuel those, because you've got a long run the next day, and if you don't fuel them, you feel garbage for the rest of the day, and then halfway into the next day. So for me, that's just like having enough carbohydrates per hour on board, which also helps with then preparing for the race day nutrition. So particularly for the full, like, and even for the half distance, you have to train your body's ability a bit to be able to take in the volume of fluid and carbohydrate per hour that you're going to need for the race. And coming from, so when I was younger, I had a bit of, especially in year like 11, year 12, I had a bit of issues with eating, and I would undereat, and I got very, very skinny, and my family was quite worried about me, and it was a control thing, because I couldn't control, like, I'm quite a type A personality, and I couldn't control the outcome of my exams and what score I wanted to get. but I could control what I was putting into my body. So I became very obsessed with that. And then when I met Hannah, actually, because she had similar issues when she was younger, and she's a bit older than me, and she'd kind of gotten through it a bit and helped me with eating. And now I realize how important it is to fuel it, because it helps so much with being able to back up day after day. And that's the important thing, is if you don't have the energy to execute the training well, then you're not going to get the right stimulus your body needs to adapt, or to force the adaptation, and therefore get the fitness. So yeah, there's a lot to it, and I think it's a big thing that I've become a lot more aware of. And it's funny because my training partner Lockie, like he's an extremely good cyclist, and I always give him so much crap because he doesn't feel his bike rides at all, and we'll always get to like 3 hours in and he's like, mate, I'm stuffed. And we'll start a ride and he's like, yeah, I've only got water today with me. And I'm like, what are you doing? But he's so good on the bike that he can kind of fudge his way through it. Whereas for me, I know if I don't have enough on board, like I'll be in trouble. Like 3 hours in, I'll be really starting to struggle. So we do a lot of volume in this sport because the swimming and biking, isn't weight bearing. So you're doing a lot more hours than you could do just as a runner. So yeah, you have to make sure you're fueling, especially in those really long sessions. So it's a very important part of it.
It's interesting, man. I'm really interested in what you sort of just mentioned about the controlled eating back when you were in year 12 and you were, just trying to control the outcome. So I went actually through a really similar phase when I was about 14 or 15. I was living in WA and my mum, I just grew up living with my mum, and she got super worried because I was in the exact same scene. I just started to think, all right, well, I'd actually just won my first state title over in WA. I was 13. And then I started to think, all right, well, I'll look at these Kenyan athletes, and I was like, all right, well, there's nothing to them. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I had a little bit of chunk. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to have to just lose weight. And so pretty much, I reckon for 18 months, all I was comfortable eating was fruit. Like I laugh about it now, but at the time it was like a really serious issue. I remember going out for dinner and asking the chefs, like, what oil are you using? What kind of pasta is it? And they'll go, mate, you're a pain in the ass. But I was super obsessive. And I think a little bit, I'm probably a little bit of a type A nature as well, man. Like I can not easily, I'm getting better at it as I'd say I've actually radically improved the way as I've gotten older. It becomes less of a factor in my life. But when I'm facing stress or when I'm upset or when I'm out of control, I can very easily get into like an obsessive kind of mindset, from thinking to actions to whatever else. And I mean, there's a million strategies that have been like literally just game changers in my life that I'm sure you're aware of. But it's something that a lot of guys don't really speak about openly, I don't think, especially the eating side of things. Because I went to a couple of clinics when I was about 12 years old there was me and about 12 anorexic girls just sitting in a room. And it was just a strange experience because I was like, far out. Well, this is obviously something that either a lot of guys aren't open about or a lot of guys aren't experiencing. And it's no surprise to me that people who are excellent at what it is that they're doing, especially in the sporting scene, are a little bit of that nature, because there's constant room to tinker. There's constant room to adjust. There's always a focus. It's nice to be able to use that energy well. But is that something that you've sort of, you're sitting here looking like the most relaxed bloke I've ever seen. So I assume that you've really started to take steps in the positive direction with that stuff. But how did you navigate your way through that? Because control is obviously something that we never have completely.
It's the same. It's in my nature. Like even my brother, he's like a corporate lawyer, and he's just like, he's relaxed a lot more now. But I probably grew up looking at him and how dedicated and focused he was to his studies and everything, and I was like, oh wow, like he's just got that real commitment. So probably from in year 11, year 12, so 16 to 18 years of age, like I was running more, and it wasn't necessarily a performance thing for me, but I remember going to the GP with my mum, and the GP was this older lady in her 50s, and she's trying to tell me how it's just and to my mum that it's just a control thing, and that I can't control what's going on outside with exams and my results and stuff. So but I can control what I'm putting into my body. And at the time, I remember thinking like, F off, like, you don't know what you're talking about. And then as I got older, I was like, yeah, damn, she was so right. But it's like you said, you can laugh about it now and be like, it's just food, like, and you need it to perform and to live. And the reality is, if you're eating good food, like plenty of vegetables and nothing like really processed, like you can eat a lot of vegetables and not worry too much about like how you look, like, because it's all healthy stuff. But at the time for me, it was really obsessive. And I was the same, like I went through a stage where like basically all I'd eat was like chicken breasts, and I'd get angry at my mum if she was using oil when she was cooking our food, and like super obsessed. And like even when I met Hannah we got together kind of third year university, I still had tendencies with things like, at the time I was eating a lot, like basically only fruit and smoothies and stuff like that. And I remember when we kind of got together and she's like, what are you doing? Like, she's like, I know what you're feeling, because I've been through it as well, but like, it's okay to eat cheese and it's okay to eat these other things. So she kind of really normalized food a lot for me. And then I got to the stage where I realized that, that if I was fueling myself, and I think in year 12, so when I was 18, I got down to like 54 kilos at some stage. Wow. Yeah. And I'm like 175 centimeters. So I was like, I was really, really skinny. And then at the same time, like then I got into triathlon in the first years of uni. And then I realized like the more I'm eating, the better I'm performing, and I'm putting on muscle, and I'm able to produce more power on the bike, and I'm able to swim better because I'm stronger, and I'm able to run better because I'm stronger. And so for me, then it became like more a focus on not so much worrying about how I look and try, like, I had that kind of, I don't even know exactly what the term for it is, but you look at yourself in the mirror, like you said, and you'd be like, oh, there's a little bit of this there and whatever, which becomes like a real obsessive thing. But then I just realized like, no, actually the healthier I am, the better I'm performing. And what I actually really want is performance. It's not so much, I don't really care that much about how I'm looking. And like the reality is the more you're performing and training better, the better your body's going to look, because you're getting stronger and fitter anyway. So like, it was just, yeah. But like point. You said, at the time, it was like debilitating, because it was so obsessive. And it became like, that sole focus of like thinking about your next meal and what you're going to eat and who's cooking it and all that sort of stuff, which is, it's not a good way it's not a fun way to live. But yeah, I mean, in many ways, it's a form of mental illness, really, isn't it? And luckily for you and I, we kind of managed to grow out of it and relax around the way we look at food and stuff. But and you're right, a lot of guys don't experience it, I don't think, as much as young females and stuff, but I think they do, a lot do, and they just don't really talk about it as much either.
Yeah. What's been so helpful for me is I started to view my mindset towards it as essentially like a weak muscle that hadn't been worked out. So and for whatever reason, that just resonated with me. Once I was like, all right, well, so I'm having this issue again. But if I started to hear that if you start to develop the ability to challenge it, or to see it from a different perspective, or to, just release your emotion from a particular thought, which starts to trigger these other emotions, it was really helpful. So now whenever I go through it, I go, okay, well, it's just like if I didn't go to the gym for 6 months, I'll lose a little bit of muscle definition. If I'm not working on, my mindset and the way I'm choosing to see things, then eventually that's going to get a bit flabby and start to flare up itself. And as a bloke who's always seen the benefits of training, that for me was a game changer. So I guess I say that as an encouragement to anyone out there who appreciates the discipline of distance running. it was always nice. I think once I started to meet a few people like yourself, or now myself, who realize that there's a life which is great on the other side of these things, it's like, so it's not this big scary monster that's going to be there forever. It's like, just stop feeding it, which is easier said than done sometimes. Not literally, maybe a bad choice of words with this particular topic, but stop feeding the emotion into it, and eventually it starts to die down. So that's been a real eye opener to me.
It can be so hard though as a teenager, when you've got all like the anxiety around school and friendships and all that sort of trying to fit in and all that sort of stuff. It can be so hard, but you just hope that like most people can eventually work through it, and like you said, kind of detach the emotions from it a little bit. But it's certainly a process, and even Hannah and I will talk about it every now and then too, and she sometimes will go through phases where she starts to kind of, and we'll check each other on it every now and then if we kind of see each other kind of tending towards, it's like, why aren't you, like, have you eaten after you did that 90-minute track session? I had some orange juice like 3 hours ago. It's like, hang on, like, come on.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So we're good in that way. We'll kind of check each other on little things that we know we tend to kind of fall back into, which is really good. And some people don't have that, but I hope, they can find someone that can help them with that for sure.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, dude, I told you we'd talk for 60 minutes. We're already 10 minutes over, and I could keep chatting, so I'm not going to steal the rest of your day. I've also just got a little notification on my computer that says your disc is almost full. So I was getting nervous, and I was thinking, far out, I better end this soon before I lose the whole podcast. But dude, mate, it's good to finally catch up, and good to hear you doing so well. And hey, just good to see your face. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, if people find value in it, and in a few months' time we want to catch up again, then we can go for it. Absolutely.
Mate, 100%. That'd be great.